What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Marsh Talk. Today's episode is one that honestly is probably more for myself and my idea of wanting to record, just because this is something that I feel like I'd call Chris and have all these questions about. But this episode is going to be all about targeting trophy trout. And who better to talk about that than Chris Bush? Welcome back, man.
Hey, buddy. Thanks, man. I've appreciate it. Certainly, I know we've shared a number of texts. Really proud of your growth for Marsh Talk and really excited for you and kind of what you have going on. But in terms of like trophy speckled trout, I'm certainly a student of the game, but in no way, shape, or form the end all be all. Like I said, when I was talking to Andrew Spinetti and the Laguna podcast we just did, man, they're incredibly more deserving people to certainly have this conversation with.
Yeah.
And I truly do mean it, man. I mean, there's obviously some legends in the game out there that just know significantly more. I just had that phone call. We're just on here getting ready to record, and that's one of those guys, right? So I
Right.
say all that to say, man, I appreciate it. I try to definitely hone my skills. Not always productive, but I'll do what I can and field any questions. But I love it, man. This is a passion for me. It's a labor of love, and I would love nothing more than obviously a lot more people catching larger, big fish
Hmm.
or larger trophy trout. Mainly because if they do, and if they get a chance to experience that, then chances are they'll gain a better appreciation for that and ultimately take care of the resource a little bit better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, how many dirty 30s do you have on your belt?
Yeah, so it's seven now. Thank God.
Seven now.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty cool. I'll use the words Doc J. Wright and uh, Jay Watkins and many others. Man, you got to hunt in the right ranch, and certainly being here in Texas, it's certainly hunting on the right ranch. And I will say though, as a transplant, it was all self-taught, and
Hmm.
self-learned, if you will. So I certainly stumbled into a few of them. Some of them I really kind of made an educated guess, and it ended up panning out. But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, if you have more 30-inch fish swimming around your feet, then the odds of you catching one are certainly bigger, right? But
Right.
Louisiana, shoot, 30 isn't necessarily the magical number. Maybe it's 25 or 27. That's a huge fish for there, right? And so
Absolutely.
if it can put you in a right position to target some of those bigger fish, then that's a different story. And we just had that conversation with Doc J. Wright. Anybody who's familiar with him, he catches a lot of really large fish. I want to say he's a four-time IGFA world record holder in various line classes for fly fishing for speckled trout. And as we were talking, you know, he he's looking for 9 and 10 pound class fish.
Hmm.
That's what his goal is. Now he's fishing again the right waters for that. But at the end of the day, that is his objective, is to catch literally world class fish. And to that is, not only do you have to put yourself in that mindset, but you have to make these educated decisions, kind of hone your craft, be a student of the game, and then go perform, right? Trust
Right.
your technique, trust everything else. And it was cool because in that seminar, and we were talking through that, we had people from Alabama, we had people from Louisiana, we had people from Georgia that were on the call. And albeit, yeah, they might not be on obviously 9, 10, 11 pound class fish, but at the end of the day, is that if they're looking for those, five, sixes, and sevens in Louisiana, and they're on threes and fours, let's say, maybe that's where they have to maybe shift gears a little bit. And
Hmm.
that's the difference, is you can take that information and not go, wow, okay, those are enormously large fish, but you can take the information, apply it to your own fishery, and target the biggest fish that's in your fishery, right? And that's
Right.
that's really the thing that we enjoy talking about, is there are some things that transcend over state lines, and I think most of it is really just boils down to either mindset and certainly understanding a little bit more about their behavior, and
Hmm.
that's the key, man. So
Yeah.
it's been fun. But yeah, seven. My biggest is 32 and a half, or my longest is 32 and a half, and my largest is right at 11 pounds. Yes, sir.
Wow. And did all seven of those come from Texas?
They did.
Yeah, all from Texas.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I
So it
lived in
definitely speaks.
Florida. I lived in Florida for 2 years. I lived in Mississippi, obviously, for a long time. But yeah, I mean, all seven of them came from here. let's say 5 of the 7 came out of the same bay, which is Baffin Bay. 2 of the
Baffin.
other 7 came from kind of the Upper Laguna Corpus area.
Okay.
So, Baffin is my home waters, man. I'll tell you.
Okay.
I mean, when I moved here, Corpus is probably the lowest or the closest point of entry in terms of the fishery, which I started kind of cutting my teeth in there, walking and wading there. And then once I got a little solo skiff and I started exploring more. Uh, fishing the front of Baffin, launching out of Bird Island, launching out of the back at Coffer, Williamson, fishing the back, even launching out of the JFK and fishing the Upper Laguna Madre. That might not mean a lot, but people from Texas will certainly understand. But it really
Yeah.
boils down to just putting your feet in the water, at least for us as wade fishermen, feeling out different areas. And I love those long wades, man, just because I try to mentally map areas that I've been to and understand, kind of what the bottom texture is, but also the contours and maybe some
Mhm.
depressions. And there are certain nuances, man, into some of these areas and some of these spots that just perpetually produce large fish, man. And that's what's been the fun part. Some of it's rock, some of it might be like a hard clay, and
Mhm.
some of it might be with just white sugar sand with the hard ledge, right? And
Right.
it just depends on time of year, water height, water temperature, all those other variables, right? And so that's what's been the fun part, is really pulling that apart um, over the course of time to really figure out and put myself in the best situation at the right time.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the info. I'm going to start off with moon phase. When you're looking to go and target a trophy trout, what moon phases are we looking for?
Man, jump right into it. I love it.
Right into it.
No, that's cool. So, man, there's been many schools of thought. I think many of the old timers, certainly Pops was one. Hey, best time to target a big fish is right before the week before a full moon. Well, he's not wrong. That's for sure. But I'll tell you, it's been eye opening because since 2018, we started capturing. 2017, 18, really 2018 is when we started capturing our Dirty 30 data, which is basically a citation program where people will input and basically apply or provide catch data. We would
Mhm.
map that across the time. Now, fast forward to 2025, we've opened the aperture to start collecting 27-inch trout and above into that program. And like I shared with you before, can I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Give me a sec. This will actually hopefully make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, and for anybody that's just listening, feel free to check out the YouTube video of this. That way you can see all this data that Chris is sharing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So right here, actually, that's not the one. Let me go up here. This is the one I really want to talk about. Okay. So, well, that is actually very relevant. No, I'll get there, bud. Sorry.
Okay.
There we are. So, Dirty 30 citations, as you can see, we've had 418 in its entirety, right? So, since
Mhm.
2018 to current to present, we have had 418. In our heavy hitters, we've had 2,138 um, registration, which aren't your 7 and above, but they do capture 7 and aboves. And I'll get that breakdown here in a second. But trophy
Mhm.
trout citations, we've had 1,162 total. I say all that to say is that's a lot of data points. That's actually 3,718 data points. And the cool part about it is it does capture kind of fish feeding behavior. So many of these fish are basically, let's say, 7 pounds and above, so 27
Mhm.
inches and above. But we've also captured, a lot of the other fish through our heavy hitters programs for 3 pound class fish and above, which again, let's go back to Louisiana or Alabama or Mississippi or Georgia. I mean, that's a really sizable fish for that fishery. And so all that to say is we're just trying to understand a little bit more about their fish feeding behavior. So
Right.
the cool thing is, if people that are watching and those who are listening, we broke it down because we really wanted to study, when those fish were feeding. And so really what we see, and again, I'll try to explain it for those who are listening. Um, we have basically a bar graph, and the bar graph from left to right is really the highest to the lowest productivity. On the left hand side, the best moon phase to target a big fish is heads and tails above all the others is the third quarter of the moon phase leading into the new moon. So really in advance of the new moon has had significantly more production. Second to the to the new moon. So second in productivity is the first quarter leading into the full moon. So that's where I said my pops, hey, the best time to target a big fish and is a week before the full moon. Again, he's not wrong because, yeah, there's certainly a lot of productivity in advance of that moon phase, but really the best time to target a big fish is third quarter leading into the new moon. The worst, right, is obviously sitting on the couch. That means you're not making any cast, but second to that would be really after the full moon. So full moon to third quarter is really your kind of more or less quote unquote worst productive moon phase in terms of targeting large fish. The other part to that is if you can see that, Josh. And again, for those who are listening, we just started diving into majors and minors. So whether or not those fish have been caught around a major or minor or in a major or minor, and none. And so I have circled, for those who are watching, I have circled is, again, third quarter leading into the new moon. A lot of those fish that are caught, and that's by weight, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 340.72 is really weight. So have actually come none of the above. Second is around the major. And then if you go down a little bit further, that full moon to the third quarter, that least productive moon phase that I was telling you about, 166.82. So that's its most productive is around the minor, right? So
Okay.
it's pretty interesting to kind of start really, diving through all that stuff.
Yeah, without a
But
doubt.
yeah, so and then last thing on that, because again, dude, I could talk about this stuff forever, but the cool part about it is I had Lucas Sahinian and I've talked to him. I want to have him on a live stream to kind of dive into this. And he was a student at A&M Corpus Christi. And he was really diving into our trout citation data for his statistics class. And really, he broke it down by virtue of lunar age. And so, again, for those who are watching, you can see that 0 to 1 is the number of days. So 0 and 1 is around the new moon. And in the 14 and 15 that you see there is the full moon. And in the 28th and 29th day of that month, if you will, is the new moon. So that captures your first and your third quarters into that. And you can see basically a sine wave of productivity where there's a lot more feeding and a lot more fish being caught in advance of the new moon. So in other words, there are two kind of more or less separate studies, if you will, that really kind of say the same thing, which is the third quarter leading into the new moon is certainly more productive than any other moon phase, but second best is certainly leading into the full moon.
Okay.
And the worst moon phase, again, that I'll say it again, is really just not going at all.
Yeah. I mean, you can't catch them if you don't go, right?
True, man. I mean, as you saw, there's productivity in every moon phase. I did look back at mine in terms of the 30-inch fish that I caught. I did catch 130 on the worst, phase possible. And that was maybe more divine than anything because I was with my son, and I've shared this before, is with my oldest son, and we're fishing a very non-big fish spot. And it ended up being, I think that was actually number 4, if I remembered right. But it was a fish I caught in a Ned rig of all things, right? So it just goes to show that you can't catch them on the couch. So you can take all this data and science and try to put all these trends to it and this, that, and the other thing. But at the end of the day, if you're not making any cash, you certainly have no chance. So get out there and be active in your fishery and try to, put yourself in the right position as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said you caught that one on a Ned rig, which we'll kind of touch on that, but maybe that kind of lead into downsizing your bait in those less favorable moon phases.
Man, so that's the interesting part about it is we haven't looked into, in terms of we actually I think we did in 2020. It was 19 and 20. We actually looked into lure type the most productive lure type, as you would imagine, would be soft plastics for catching a bigger fish.
Hmm.
And I attributed that to like really two different things. The first is um, everybody, I think for the most part, it's kind of like a gateway drug. Everybody can pretty much go pick up a pack of soft plastics and fish, right? And either
Hmm.
catch fish, and again, right place, right time. And the fish is hungry and he's vulnerable or she's vulnerable, then obviously they're going to eat. And so, and then just aside from that, a lot more people throw them. So
Yeah.
not only are they more available and a little bit easier to work, but they're also just more available. They're less expensive and this, that, and the other thing. The second productive time, which was super interesting, was the springtime. There was a lot of topwater, a lot more topwater submissions, or a lot more submissions that were caught on topwater during the springtime. And we
Hmm.
saw the second best time was actually not in the summertime, but in the wintertime for topwater. And then your, Corkies, your soft down XLs, your bigger hard soft plastics, your 27 MRs, and many of those other kind of bigger soft and hard plastic jerk baits and slow sink suspend style baits. That's when their prominence was actually in the wintertime. So all that to say is, for me, in my general rule of thumb, is typically most would say downsize in the wintertime because the
Hmm.
fish are maybe not looking to expend a lot of calories to eat. And you kind of, my dad was big on that, man. We would always throw like sparkle beetles in small soft plastics, little like H&H grubs and all that stuff
Yeah.
way back in the day. In the wintertime. And what I've found to be true is really I do that now more in the summertime than anything. And I throw a lot of those bigger profile baits in the wintertime. And that could be for two reasons, right? The first is the bait availability in the wintertime is there is less bait in the fishery.
Right.
And so those fish that are there and present typically have a bigger profile. And then aside from that, those fish are wanting to consume one meal that has more calories and then go lay back down and survive, right? And so they've become masters at efficiency, certainly as they've gotten bigger. And so they start to eat some of these bigger meals and then they'll go back down, as opposed to in the warmer months, spring and summertime, you have a lot more bait abundance, right? You have a lot more
Right.
bait, that have spawned offshore, have now kind of washed back into the fishery as a nursery ground. And then you've had inshore, fin fish kind of spawn and hatch. And so there's a lot more smaller fin fish and just a lot of bait availability in the fishery. And so now you have some, you're really kind of matching the hatch at that, in that,
Hmm.
certain time. So plus two, I think, with water temps, getting in the upper 80s, that's when I think fish can get also very lethargic. So much like it would be like in the upper 40s, those fish get lethargic. When the water temps start to climb and get teeter around 87 to 90 degrees, they're probably not looking to, expend a whole lot of energy there as well, and just kind of sitting down deep. And what do you throw when you're trying to target a fish down deep? You're throwing typically a jig on a 3/16, or here, maybe a 3/16 or a quarter of heaviest. And then there, obviously your half ounce and 3/8 and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And so I say all that to say is my general rule of thumb is I try to downsize profile, typically kind of spring leading into summer. And then I typically try to increase bait size in fall coming into winter.
Okay. Now, now we've covered moon phase. What about weather? Have you noticed any trends with weather when targeting trophy trout, such as say like a bluebird summer day or a overcast, kind of rainy?
Yeah, great question. And yes, um, I think that goes back to, my discussions with Mike McBride and Jay Watkins and, Cliff Webb and David Rousey's the world. And I mean, it's cool to have, those resources available to kind of talk through that. They've seen certainly a lot more than I've ever seen in my life, but
Hmm.
through my own personal experiences as well, I feel like, sometimes obviously in the weather, you have a little bit more inclement weather, a little bit more cloud cover, maybe a low pressure system pushing in, starting to kind of, drop that air pressure. with the barometric pressure. And so what I find there is sometimes there's, those, I feel like certainly here in the Texas coast, those fish will actually pull up and pull up a little bit more skinny, make themselves a little bit more available as opposed to high pressure,
Mm-hmm.
um, where, you know, I feel like a lot of those bluebird, high pressure, low wind kind of days, what happens is I think those fish pull a little bit deeper. That has been very, very true. It feels like here lately in the last couple months, I've seen it play out many, many times. So yesterday was a classic example. So I've been on a really good uh, couple months. I've been fishing a lot more, near coming into retirement for the Air Force, and so I've certainly had a lot more availability to go. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have been doing that. I've been taking advantage of that. And so I've been fishing, gosh, 2, 3 times a week, and it's been nice. And so if a lot of the fish that I was catching um, pulled probably deeper by virtue of just it being colder.
Mm-hmm.
We've had really low water temps, certainly in the early February timeframe. And when that happened, this fish pulled a little bit deeper. But I will say, as the warm as we did get on the back end of those hard fronts, and that water started to warm up a little bit, those fish did pull up skinny. So that's one weather anomaly causing fish's behavior patterns to change. Second to that would be now we've been a little bit more of a stable weather pattern, kind of standard South Texas, where it's just a little bit cool in the morning, warms up, upper 80s, low 90s in the
Mm-hmm.
afternoons and stuff like that. Water temps have been, upper 70s, low 80s. And it's been, we don't get a whole hell of a lot of rain here. And so the fish have been kind of in a little bit more of a predictable pattern. In the morning time, they'll be a little skinnier and accessible and maybe feeding on, up on a ledge or really close to a ledge. And then as the sun comes up, they'll fall off and they'll go a little bit deeper. And so what I've been throwing is I've been throwing a lot of Little John XLs and provokers. So if you see that, but yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
a Little John XL, and then your provokers, which is more like a jerk shad, if you will. So saltwater sass and down south, whatever it is. I like them because you can cast them. But bottom line is throwing them deep, just really bouncing them real slow, and it's a subtle tick on the bottom. And yesterday, though, my son and I went, and I went with a box full of soft plastics. I have my box literally right here for those who are watching, and it's got 3 trays full of soft plastics, various jig head sizes, X, Y, and Z. And there was rain predicted, but when we got down there, there was a lot more rain, like there. It
Mm-hmm.
was thundering, lightning around and stuff. Certainly not, where we're unsafe, but it was raining on us and stuff like that. And a lot more low cloud deck. And um, all that to say is going back to some of those same areas where those fish patterns where they would be up on that ledge and feeding up
Mm-hmm.
the shallower edge. And normally you would chase them off that ledge as the sun would come up. Well, man, it's 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it's raining on us, and it's real low cloud cover, low winds. And those fish that were up there actually, I think, stayed up there and almost pulled even skinnier. And
Hmm.
so what I did is I made the adjustment, and this gets back to really understanding where you're fishing. And
Okay. Yeah.
so what I have here is a Texas Custom Lures Double D. A Double D, if for those who are familiar, is a very, it's a twitch bait that dives down maybe, let's say, 8 to 10 inches, and then it floats back up to the surface. And so I was fishing in these real small depressions, pretty close to the bank, where it would maybe go from knee deep to thigh deep, back to like shin deep. So very, very shallow. And they were just sitting in those little bitty, like channels, if you will, those little depressions. And I was twitching that Double D right over them. And I mean, they were just absolutely smoking it. And I only had one in my box because that hasn't been the pattern that's played out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had it in there just because I normally do carry one. And as it turns out, that's what those fish were feeding and where they were feeding. And that was, I feel like, purely predicated based off of weather.
Yeah.
If the sun had popped out, which it eventually did, those fish did fall off and we didn't catch any more. But I say all that to say is weather and understanding those weather patterns, high and low pressures, and where those fish can be found in the column as it relates to structure is vitally important, because now you can understand what tool in your toolbox that you can now go ahead and apply to try to target some of those bigger fish. Very long
Yeah.
answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No, but I mean, it's the right answer.
No,
uh,
not always the right answer, bro.
well,
Trust me, there's a lot of trial and error there.
yeah.
But I will say, I mean, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And it just felt like it, right? I
Hmm.
saw the signs that were visible to me. Certainly was one, and it was a feeding slick up skinny. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, it's like shin deep there. There's no way there's a slick had to blow in off that ledge and then just kind of settle there before I saw it, right? And I'm like, and then you could see some mullet, some really smaller fin fish just kind of skirting the surface. I'm like, man, that's too much. That's too many visible clues for me to ignore and not like at least give it an effort. And
Yeah.
so I pulled out a lure in my box that I felt that could fish that, water column effectively. And sure enough, man, first cast, 3 pumps, and boom. I mean, fish ended up weighing 624, right? So, I mean, and it wasn't a fluke, because literally next cast I caught a 487, and then my son and I sat there. We didn't even move our feet, man. We sat there, and I think we caught around like 12 or 15 that were like in that 3 to 4 pound class, right? Which is a solid fish here and
Yeah.
anywhere for that matter. But I say all that to say is they were that many fish in that shin to thigh deep water when I'm throwing and have been throwing for the last, like, let's say month and a half, 3 days a week off the ledge, fishing, let's say that 4.5 to 5 foot realm.
Hmm. Man. Yeah. Well, that says a lot too about paying attention to uh, the clues around you. You know, like you said, you noticed that bait slick over there, and you didn't ignore it. You threw over there, and it paid off for you.
Yeah, my
Um,
dad coined a phrase, man. He said, don't read about the news, make the news. And then we were fishing with Mike McBride. My dad said that phrase out loud, and I really obviously cherish Mike McBride and a lot of his, uh, I guess, his insight. And so he took that phrase and said, "Don't read about the news, read the water and make the news." And there, I think that's where the true sense of that phrase really comes from, especially in the angling world, is if you take what's available, don't go off of yesterday's news, fish every day new.
yeah.
See what's around you, have the confidence to fish it, know what you can use to fish and explore that type of water, and then try to make the news. Again, it doesn't
Yeah.
always work, but again, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah. And so one day last week, I was listening back to an old Speckled Truth podcast with Kyle, and
Johnson?
yeah,
Ah,
and
yeah.
he mentioned a phrase that he learned. It might have been from Mike McBride, but it was the lion is never far from the gazelle. And
Yep.
I don't know why. I've listened to that episode a couple of times, but for some reason last week that phrase, it just stood out to me, and I was like, man, I mean, you think about, yeah, you want to find the bait, but I guess thinking of it in that aspect, it just really kind of it it really stuck with me.
Yeah. And I mean, it's true though, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you find bait in an area, that's one of the visible clues that you can easily look for. There's some bait here. That's typically almost the first phrase that I either utter out of my mouth when a boat comes off a plane, or I'm stepping in. I can see fish. And then aside from that, not only is there bait in the area, but for us, especially here in Texas, where's the bait in reference to the structure? That
Hmm.
is huge, dude, because we might be waiting a line and we know that there's a drop, or we know that there's a little tabletop available or something there. And if the bait is in and around that, then that tells me that those fish are associating with that type of structure.
Hmm.
If there's grass on let's say a large sandy flat and some checkerboarded grass with a few potholes, but there's no bait there, but there's bait off of the ledge, I'd be less inclined to go fish what looks like better visible structure to me and focus more on something that I necessarily can't see because I see the bait. Now, I'd probably explore both and see what happens, but I would venture to say that the fish are going to be behind the bait, right? And so maybe
Yeah.
I'll posture it off that ledge, where the bait is. So I'm very, very keen on where I'm seeing mullet flip. And then if I look across the horizon, I see another mullet flip. And again, it's about 50 yards off the bank from where that other mullet flipped, and it's about 50 yards off the bank. What structure is there, and why is that? Why is it holding that bait? Oh, okay, there's some other, submerged rock there, or is there whatever it is? It's
Mm-hmm.
worth exploring. And applying that back to Louisiana, probably a little bit less, I would say, because I'll go back to where I grew up in fishing in Port Sulphur. We fished a lot of submerged oyster reefs, so
Mm-hmm.
really we were just looking for bait present. Certainly not necessarily as it related to structure, but if there was a lot of bait in the area, then certainly we had a little bit better feeling about the productivity of that area,
Yeah.
knowing that we're still fishing 6 to 8 foot on an oyster reef out in the middle of Bay Ronquille or something like that. So
Yeah.
I say all that to say is the line. You're right. Line is never far from the Gazelle. Here fishing, and maybe those who are fishing other wadeable areas, certainly as it relates to structure, but maybe for those who aren't and maybe fishing a little bit more of a deeper water area complex, just if there's bait available, that's definitely going to make me a little bit more confident in my approach to that area.
Yeah, without a doubt. Um, Now, what about time of year? Have you noticed a more productive time of year when it comes to trophy trout?
Um, I can't say that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that, and it probably varies so much from state to state.
Yeah.
I would venture to say probably the guys that are in the Virginia, North Carolina, and the Northeast, areas and those fisheries, I'm sure they have a more seasonal run. Here in the Texas coast, it's probably more of a year-round fishery. I feel like the bigger fish are a little bit more vulnerable to lures, um, probably in the fall, winter, and early spring. I think once it does start to warm up, a lot of those larger fish probably become a little bit more lethargic, maybe a little bit more inaccessible,
Mm-hmm.
maybe feeding a little bit more at night, just a little bit, maybe different pattern of behavior. But live bait guys, I'm sure, just railing them. You know what I'm saying? And so maybe
Yeah.
they just, again, they're less maybe in hunt mode and more in survival mode, which you could also
Mm-hmm.
say the same for like wintertime. But in terms of productivity with our numbers, I can't say that one has been better than the other. Um, I mean, you could also go back, hey man, summertime we see more fish caught, but then you'd be like, well, shit, man, there's just more people fishing. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of people don't want to fish when it's 45 degrees outside and it's cold.
Yep.
They're not going to bring the family out, right? They're not going to book a guide, and so I can understand all those kind of thought processes there. But for me personally, I enjoy fishing, fall, winter, probably spring. If I'm looking for a big fish, I've said it time and time again, it's probably January through March for me here.
Mm-hmm.
Probably that could also vary too, because it just depends on your fishery. Um, Years past, and I had a really good conversation with Captain Sally Black on this. She's going to be on the podcast for us in season 4. She's awesome. One of the, you know, she's she's a female guide who guides out of Baffin Bay, but she's been guiding for a couple decades, man, 3 decades
Mm-hmm.
or more. And so her and Aubrey, when they had, Baffin Bay Ride and Gun, I caught up with her last week. Yeah, last week. I was talking to her, and we talked on the phone as well. And you know, she feels like in years past, because we were talking about different Baffin in general. In Baffin in general, it seems like the last 2 years has been getting later for
Mm-hmm.
me as a transplant. So I was catching a lot of really nice fish in January and February, and typically she was like, oftentimes really April, May, and June are really fire back where she's fishing in the back of Baffin.
Hmm.
And she was saying that it mainly was more predicated that once Mansfield did its thing down in the lower Laguna Madre and the upper Laguna Madre and kind of Corpus area did its thing, a lot of those fish would funnel to the back of Baffin. And so
Hmm.
it would be later,
Yeah.
right? And so it's hard to say. I think, again, for me, though, the heavier fish I've caught have all come in, again, probably January, February, March.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I could pick
But
my own thoughts apart, but if I'm targeting a true fish of a lifetime weight wise, and we're seeing it with heavy hitters as well, um, is that a lot of our bigger, heavier fish are really coming right now. I mean, shoot, dude, we've had 5/10. We'd had 10/9. We've had, what was it? Let me go back here. Just those alone is 15 trout over 9 pounds here in the state of Texas, and literally is the first 3 months of the fish of the year, right? So
yeah.
that just goes to show you that a lot of those really heavy fish are coming during this time of year.
Yeah. Now, what about wind? Do you find like a low to no wind day to be more productive, or maybe a more windy day?
Yeah, let me think about that for a sec. There's so many ways to pull that one apart as well. It's certainly easier to fish in no in less wind,
Yeah.
and certainly that varies as it relates to state, more because it's predicated on tide. So, you know, going back to Louisiana and when I grew up fishing there, and fishing Barataria area, it was really moon phase. It just depended on what the tide range was. So I really enjoyed those lighter tide days, zero point 0.5 to right at a foot.
Hmm.
My dad and I love those double flip flop days because those were typically around kind of the new and full, and there wasn't a lot of tide, but we felt like we just caught bigger fish. Certainly didn't catch any more fish, but we caught a lot. It felt like bigger fish around those
Yeah.
tidal swings, and obviously we liked fishing around less wind just because we could work our baits a little bit more properly and stuff like that. And then I move here, and some of these base systems don't have tide. I mean, it's almost marginal at that point. And so really the wind is your tide. It moves a lot of water. And I'll say in the Baffin area, if you don't get a lot of wind, you don't get a lot of water movement. And typically when you don't get a lot of water movement, you get a lot of really stale fish. And so they just are less inclined to feed. And then oftentimes what you'll just see kind of that daily, wind come up, typical South Texas patterns that, late afternoon wind will start to pick up and that bite will pick up. And
Hmm.
I've seen that play out many, many times. But I'll also say after we've had a lot of really hard fronts, where it's been blowing, let's say, in advance of the front, out of the southeast and out of the south real hard. And
Hmm.
then the front will then blow back through, and then it'll start to push out of the northwest and then ultimately shift out of the northeast and kill out. And sometimes those post frontal days, certainly not where it's true post frontal, where it's like bluebird, super high pressure, cold, but like when it starts to really start to shift, get a little bit less out of the north and northeast, and certainly start kind of shifting back towards the east southeast, but still lower wind. I like those because I think what happens is a lot of that water has either pushed and then pulled out of the fishery. So I think we're still catching a lot of that residual water flow in and out of the fishery
Hmm.
despite no wind movement at all. Right. And so I've seen that play out where it'll be a bluebird day, it'll be post frontal, but the water will be moving because we've had such really, really violent swings in wind
Yeah.
direction, is that it's moving one way or the other. And now what's happened is that bay is now just trying to figure out, what that right water level is. And as a result, we've been seeing kind of that water move in and out of that bay. And that's where I felt like I've caught some really nice fish. One, I could properly work my bait. Um, and all that stuff. Now, if we get 2 or 3 days of no wind or low wind days, and that can be pretty tough. So, like those foggy morning days, when you get those a couple days in a row, that can actually be pretty tough here, despite really good looking conditions and, obviously being low pressure and stuff like that. I've found those to be somewhat a little bit less productive sometimes. Sometimes they've been fire as well,
Yeah.
So again, I've seen it on different sides, but weather's again probably more predicated on your fishery, and it's a little bit more of the tidal swings as it relates to the moon. But also too, for non-tidal fisheries, it's probably more predicated on wind, where I like to see a little bit more just to move a little bit more water. So
Yeah.
anyway, it depends. That's the great Mike McBride saying, if you ask him a question as it relates to that. And anybody who does have concrete answers is lying to you, because there's no concretes in fishing. I will 100% say that. So again, that's what we love about the sport, is just getting out there and exploring it yourself and figuring it out. And you will literally bust your own myths that you've created in your own brain just by virtue of just being out there and seeing it. Right. So instead of, taking a less proactive approach and not getting out there, get out there, man, experience some of those different, if you don't like fishing post frontal, sometimes get out there and see what happens, and you'll be surprised sometimes. So
I know sometimes too, you're some people who can't freely go whenever they want. They're kind of forced to fish whatever condition is present when they have a chance to go. So yeah, that gives you an opportunity to learn more about whatever area you're fishing and those conditions.
And my hat goes off to those. I was one of those. I mean, I'm in the military, man. And so I was pretty much limited to weekends or federal holidays. And obviously then with a family, stuff might be going on. So there might be a random Saturday or Sunday in November, and I haven't fished in 2 weeks. Man, I can't put a pattern together, but I'm itching, man. I'm jonesing to get out there. That's my relief. That's my therapy. And so getting out there and experiencing that, come hell or high water, but then not only that, then having being productive, that's where I think, quote unquote, like being a weekend warrior actually may benefit you, because you are willing to learn more and be vulnerable to those conditions and adapting to those conditions. When you can cherry pick your days, then you kind of almost become stale, right? Oh, I'm going to wait it out and wait for a really, really, pretty day. Well, man, you might be really productive by doing that. And what a blessing to be able to go when you can. But on the same token is what are you learning? I like fishing like garbage conditions sometimes. It was like a couple years ago, man. It was February. And it's funny because there was nobody in the water. Nobody. It was me and my buddy Justin Furman. We went. I don't even know how I convinced him to come with me, but bottom line is we didn't see a soul all day. And we had a great day, man. We caught a lot of really large fish. And my hands were numb for like 2 days after. It was cold. I mean, it was brutal conditions. It was gnarly. And I mean, of course, we saw a few, guides and stuff out there, but like it was certainly like no fair weather fisherman would even venture to say like go out there. But I think it speaks to like sometimes, man, you just got to endure that just to like experience some of those incredible bites that are happening. And I remember posting that like a picture, and I think it was like a 28. And she was like 7.25 or something like that. And people were like, you went today? I'm like, yeah, I went today. My hands are like still numb typing this, And I'm like, dude, better, you're a better man than me, or something like that. And I mean, get out there and experience it, because being vulnerable to different weather conditions, learning more about your fishery in those shitty conditions makes you even that much more potent when the conditions are right. So,
yeah, totally agree. Topwater Co. is a premium online retailer for your tackle and gear needs. From their speed clips that make switching baits on the water a breeze, to custom small batch topwater lures, to any of your other tackle needs, they have what you need to get out on the water and make the most of your experience. If you're looking for the gear to get you to the top of your game, check out Topwater Co. And before we dive off into the gear side of this, one more question. Let's say you're out there and you're exploring a new bay system, a new estuary. What are you looking for in a spot to say this is a spot I want to fish at?
This is a really good question, mainly because I've been challenging myself to learn more and more about baffin, and baffin gets a really bad rap for claiming a lot of lower units as a result of the rocks, right? And it's, again, a guy who's not from here, I've been fishing here. I moved here in 2013. It's 2025. So I would say 10 years. So I've been fishing here for 10 years because I did 2 years in Florida before I moved back, right? So let's say 10 years. I've fished that bay pretty much for, let's say, 10 years, but I'm still learning more and more about it. And I'm challenging myself to learn other areas that I haven't heard a lot about, but I've looked on Google Earth, and I've done, all the different studies that most people do when looking at areas, but I don't know where all the rocks are. So I've been traversing very, very gingerly sometimes off the Rivera Channel. I say all that to say, especially when you get around the mouth of Baffin. Yeah. But for me, it's really about, I would say, I like deep water accessibility, certainly close to shallow water availability. So, in other words, I like having a shallow water environment, grass, sand, shell, soft mud, soft shell, rock, whatever it is, whatever that structure would be in that kind of shallower water realm, but also too closer with accessibility to that deeper water.
Yeah.
And again, go back to time of year, right? I like fishing again, fall, winter, spring. And so that maybe makes a little bit more sense because as those fronts do push through, those fish feel that. They might, temper their, they might feed real hard and then they pull back off. And even on a daily perspective, again, they might pull up, eat, and then fall back off. And I think that's typically the general nature of some of these larger fish is I don't think they sit, maybe in Mansfield they do. They sit up a little bit more shallower just because it's a shallower water fishery, period. But in the Baffin area, I feel like that's kind of what they do. They'll eat in those low light conditions, shallow, then they'll fall back off. And I think it's really to not make themselves vulnerable to like birds of prey or anything else that could eat them, right? Which isn't many things in the bay system, period. But I look for structure, again, shallow water availability to deeper water accessibility. And I've also tempered expectations for my own personal fishing expertise. So I asked my friends the question, and I've asked others the question, like, hey, what do you feel like, Josh, what do you feel like your fishing strength is? Like, are you a good deep water fisherman? Are you a good top water fisherman? Are you a good finesse fisherman? Like, what do you feel like you excel at angling wise? I'm asking you the question.
Personally, I feel like my strength has grown to be, now this is more towards redfish, but sight fishing redfish.
Okay.
That's where I feel really comfortable at fishing wise. Trout wise, I've been growing a lot of confidence in jigging, or as y'all would say in Texas, throwing tails.
Yeah.
But probably a little deeper water.
Yeah. So I asked myself that question. Here's what I've come to the realization is that I'm not a good grass fisherman. Okay. One, because, again, go back to Louisiana, man. I grew up, we don't have a lot of grass flats. I mean, Delacroix, yeah, you'll have some grass. But again, I grew up on the West Bank, and I fished the West Bank. I grew up on the East Bank. Grew up in Metairie, but let's not get that twisted. No, I'm joking. But let's say like, no, man, fishing the west side of the river, I should say, there isn't a lot of grass, and
Right.
we fish a lot of deeper structure. And so I've come to the realization that I'm pretty proficient with a jig, and I like fishing ledges. I like fishing ledges that are like either tapering or dropping off or sudden drop offs. I feel like I'm a
Hmm.
good ledge fisherman with a jig. That's probably my strength.
Okay.
And so when I'm looking for new spots, like I try to find areas that fish to my strengths.
Yeah.
And that's where when I'm starting to dive into a spot. So, for example, one of the areas that I found recently, um, some people fish it, right? Actually, I haven't seen a lot of people fish where I do, but it's not to say that people don't. I maybe fish a little bit differently because I focus more on the ledge side of it versus the flat side of it, and
Hmm.
it's been wildly productive. But again, it's as it relates to my strength.
Yeah.
But if you get me like in the upper Laguna Madre or you get me over grass, I really kind of struggle, man. I can't fish potholes. One, I don't have the patience of it. Um, I haven't been very productive in it, so I don't have a lot of confidence fishing that. But
Yeah.
if you give me a ledge or a long ledge that kind of just keeps following the contour of the bank and it goes from shallow to deep, oh, I'll pick that apart all day. I'll pick that apart all day, either a jig, jerk bait, soft plastic, or a corky or whatever it is, right? So when I'm looking for spots, that's what I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
shallow water availability, deeper water accessibility, that really kind of caters to my strengths.
Yeah. That's that's good good info there. Um, now let's dive into the gear side of this. Let's start with rods. What kind of rod are you wanting to use when you're targeting trout?
Um,
Trophy trout specifically.
well, I mean, targeting trout in general, I think is important because, I mean, I hmm, I would say I like. All right, oh
I
man,
know this is probably different for you as well because you're a wade fisherman, so you're not bringing 6, 7 rods with you for different lures and techniques. So
but here's why there's so much pause in my answers because I am very detail oriented,
hmm.
and I like to consider like the technical facets of all these things. And so a general all-purpose rod for me would be a Waterloo HP Slam Mag. If I wanted, and if let's say I was going on a buddy's boat, or I had to pick up one rod, and I haven't been for a couple weeks, and I need a rod that kind of does it all. It's going to be a Waterloo HP Slam Mag. Waterloo HP Slam Mag. In a 6.6, it's a medium with a very fast action tip. It's a good all-purpose rod. It'll throw top waters like you're heading super spooks, and I'm talking the super spooks, the big ones, to
Yeah.
even your top dogs or she dogs, like the smaller versions, to a soft nine, not the soft nine XL, but a little soft nine, to an 1/8 ounce with a mirror lure, a little John. It can literally fish the entire gambit. And I think it's just because I don't know what it is about that rod, but it just has the right amount of like flex in the tip, and then where it actually does flex in the tip, a little bit towards the tip, if you will. I feel like it gives you the ability to deliver any weight of lure um, really really well.
Yeah.
If I'm throwing jigs, and I know I'm throwing jigs, this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but again, I go back to my upbringing, man. I fishing in the '90s, I had a Castaway rod that was a medium light, moderate, pretty whippy rod, man. With a Shimano Corrado, the old Bantam Corrados,
Hmm.
um, 12 pound. I'm not throwing those now, um, but I do like. My point to that is I do like a little whippier rod, a little longer rod, 6'8", 7 foot, bait cast, and I do like throwing it on True Fluoro. Sunline Sniper's been a really good thing. So if I'm throwing a jig and I know it's a jig bite, I will almost throw, a 6/8. I have one made. By a good friend of mine, E.T. Coastal. Eric Tuss is his name, and it's a really good rod, man. And it's a little whippy, but it also has the right flex. Where if I'm fishing fluoro, which has a little bit more give certainly than braid, but less than mono, it just has a nice play. But
Mm-hmm.
I like throwing jigs on true fluoro because I just feel like there's a little bit more sponginess to it. I can work that bait. I'm used to it. I've been doing it for a long time. But also too, my corky rod. Let's go back to that. If I know I'm pretty much going to throw soft on XLs, floaters, corkies, or anything like that, I'll go to a 6.6. I'll probably stick either with a HP Slam Mag or a Carbon Mag, Waterloo, Carbon Mag or HP Slam Mag, and then I'll kind of leave it at that. For my
Mm-hmm.
jerk baits, double Ds, Ned rigs, you've heard me say this before. I really like throwing those on spinning rods. Those are 7.2s. Those are also custom made by a guy named David Wilson. The brand and really and the guy who makes them is really irrelevant. Basically, it's a medium, very fast tip, 6 to 12 pound blank, which is huge because it's a thinner tapered blank, which also gives a little bit more of that flex at the tip. But it also gives you the power and the action to deliver, a bait. Let's say a shadow wrap shad, which is 3/8 of an ounce.
Yeah.
And then I can also throw a 1/10 ounce, little Ned rig with a finesse TRD, right? I can throw those same types of lures on that spinning rod, and I typically have those paired up with Shimano Twin Power. And on all my rods, I throw 20-pound braid, other than again that dedicated jig rod. That again, I have 17-pound Sunline Sniper on there, which is funny because it was before I deployed last year. I was fishing with Justin Furman. He's a good fisherman and a good
Mm-hmm.
friend of mine here in the Texas coast. He's also got Louisiana roots too, so we've kind of bonded in that respect. But I say all that to say is we fished, and I had we were going basically fishing, and we knew we were going to go target them throwing jigs, soft plastics, and I bust out the old, the fluorocarbon. He's like, "Bro, is that mono?" I'm like, "It's fluoro, but yes, it looks weird." And I don't know, man. It's something about it. It was just I felt like the bait sank a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that mono or fluoro has a little bit more buoyancy than braid. It has certainly a little bit larger line diameter than braid. And so I feel like if I'm throwing a heavier jig, which we were throwing 3/16 ounce jigs, fishing a little bit deeper, I felt like that bait would flutter a little bit more in a column as opposed
Yeah.
to just a hard, sink and descent. And so again, it's just felt for me. And I was comfortable not necessarily feeling the hard thump, the sensitivity of a braided line, but more that little spongy tick. I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with that. And that's definitely something, if you haven't thrown it in a while, it takes a second to kind of get back to and used to, but I would never throw them like true fluoro, throwing like a soft on or any sort of slow sink or anything like that, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
purely a dedicated jig bite. But in terms of my equipment, that's typically really what I'm throwing. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot, man. It is, but it isn't. So
Now, what about leaders? You kind of beat me to my next question online, so we'll just go into leaders.
yeah, sure, man. I love talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, mainly because leaders, I think, are probably the most undervalued piece of equipment in a fisherman's arsenal, and here's
Okay.
why. Because actually, I got some here. So I've been throwing the Osprey.
Okay.
It's a monofilament leader. It's made by Mr. Jude Filipponi here in Texas in Rockport, and awesome guy. But the thing is that if you look on it, it's pretty cool. You see that .020?
Yeah.
That's a line diameter size. Let me look here. I'm looking for, all right, that's some Cigar Senshi right here. I got it. It's 0.013. So it has a smaller line diameter size, and it's a monofilament 25-pound test. So the reason I like this discussion is because, and that's again a monofilament, same pound test, smaller diameter size as opposed to this. I don't have a spool of Berkeley Big Game, but I would venture to say that's also kind of my other go-to when it comes to leader material, mainly because again, Big Game has a little bit more of a larger line diameter size, and it has a little bit more abrasion resistance. That's the only downfall to this is it has a little less abrasion resistance. It is a little softer of a mono, like a true mono. And so you find yourself retying a little bit more. That's okay. I'm comfortable with that. Even if I got a little nick and I knew it had a lot of like abrasion resistance, I'm still cutting it off and retying. It's a 10-cent piece a liter. I'm not going to let that prevent me from catching a potential 10-pounder, right? So you have to like think through that process. But I say all that to say is line diameter size and line makeup definitely impacts the descent speed and rate of a lure. It also impacts the ascent rate and speed of a lure that, dives and then floats back to the top. It also will take a bait that is, let's say, and I love it when as it relates to jerk baits, because on the package of a jerk bait, like that 6 cents provoke 106X provoke right there, it's going to say on the package 4 to 6 foot. If I throw a piece of 25-pound monofilament leader with a large line diameter size, good luck getting that to 3 feet, right? Because you're not going to be able to get that bait down because it has such resistance and drag coming through the column, and it has such buoyancy that when you actually do pause the bait, it's going to ascend quicker. So I say all that to say is pay attention to that line diameter size, especially with respect to line lead or with respect to your leader makeup, because if you don't, it can certainly be just what's available, and as long as it doesn't break, that's also a really key component. But also too, if you're looking to get different actions out of baits, or if you want to fish them shallower or deeper, then consider changing your leader size and makeup, right? You might want to go from a monofilament to a true fluorocarbon, which has a little less buoyancy and a lot more density and a thinner line diameter size. And so you can not only pack in, let's say, a 20-pound true fluorocarbon leader that has a smaller line diameter size and it doesn't float, you might be able to get that 6 cents provoke to its 6 foot dive depth that you want, right? So I say all that to say, I like monofilament leaders. I like thicker, line diameter sizes for monofilament leaders because, again, I'm fishing shallower water. So the baits I want to dive, I don't want them to dive very deep. For the baits that are sinking, I don't want them to sink very quickly because I want them to fish the column that's available, let's say thigh deep or less, much more efficiently. So that's why I pay attention to the things as simple as just a piece of leader.
Yeah. Do you have a preferred knot you like to use for your leader to main line?
I am a uni to uni guy. I do not tie an FG knot. I will get probably crucified for saying that. But here's why. I've never, knock on wood, I've never lost a fish because my leader broke. I have rarely lost a fish because my line broke, period. Mainly because I don't, I retie a lot throughout the day. And also too, the rods that I've had made, a lot of them they have a little bit bigger guides. I want to say those are number 9s on the tip and the last 3 guides on my blanks. And so the uni to uni, even though it's a bulkier knot, it'll still have the ting, ting, ting when it's going out the front, but it's not pulling. And when I'm reeling it back through, it it gets caught in the eyelet. So I have guides. I'm mindful of that. Like 25-pound to 20-pound braid. That's a pretty large knot, a uni to uni, as opposed to an FG. No problem.
Hmm.
But I'm reluctant to change because I've never had a reason to change. So
Yeah.
that's my preferred knot.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Um, Now this next thing, we've kind of touched on it already, and it's pretty open ended with conditions and things like that. But when it pertains to trophy trout, have you found a more productive than any other lure and lure color?
Yeah. Hmm. Again, we haven't had a glitch in internet or anything like that. This is a beard scratching moment. Personally, um, I've caught more of my big fish on jerk baits.
Okay.
Not because they're more efficient or more effective, but probably because I throw them more. Um,
Yeah.
I've I have caught, fortunately, my fair share of big fish on a corky, fat boys, floaters, soft dine XL, soft dines, you name it, and I feel really proficient in throwing those baits. Um, they're probably one of my outside of a jig, probably the second most bait I feel comfortable throwing. The reason I threw jerk baits so long and I still throw them as long and as much as I do is because I feel like a lot of people don't. So
Yeah.
um, they're hard to get used to. Again, if a lot of people aren't throwing them, that means a lot of the fish that are in the fishery haven't seen them. And I feel like some of those bigger fish that have now, let's say been around, let's say they're 5 to 7 years of age, have maybe crossed paths with a lure or two in the Laguna Madre or Baffin complex, right? Maybe even been caught once or twice. So do I think fish have a long-term memory like that? Probably not. But do I feel like they have a survival instinct that probably prevents them from, you know, their demise? I do. And I feel like sometimes I've seen that with jerk baits a lot where I've always called them the fish that are never meant to be caught.
Hmm.
And I find that jerk baits, I get a lot of follower fish. And I know that to be true because not that I can see them, but I can feel them.
Yeah.
When I'm working a bait, I can feel it's almost like a negative. I call it like a negative pressure, where I feel like something swiped at it, and I feel the water around like a rush around my bait to where that wasn't normal. Like you know what I'm saying? But it wasn't a hit. It wasn't like a tick or a thump or something tagged it,
Hmm.
but it was something different. And then typically, if I give it that one more like pump pump pump, and just pause it one more time, then typically they'll eat it. The response after that happens typically tells me that that fish was following. And so oftentimes if I feel that negative pressure, I give it that one, then that 1 2, and I'll pause it one more time, and boom, they rail it, and I set the hook. Regardless of where that fish is caught, typically if they're hooked like on a cheek and then just below here on the gill flap, right below their chin, oftentimes they'll just pull a long strip of drag and won't come up out of the water. They almost feel like a redfish. That's where a lot of people get fooled. Oh, I got a
Hmm.
redfish. Oftentimes the fish consumes the bait. It's in the mouth. That's when they come up almost immediately and start head shaking. But
Yeah.
those fish that have that negative pressure that eat and then they swipe at it and I think they want to trust their instinct, but it looks like something they've never seen before. And you give it that one more pump, 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 and it's like it incites their lateral line. Something like uh, primal goes off in them, man, and they just eat it, right? And they
Yeah.
eat it out of instinct and out of anger. And when you set the hook, they'll freaking tarpon out of the water. I mean, they will just clear the water, and they're like diving. I mean, it's like not
Hmm.
even a head shake. It's just whoa, and they'll like just get mad, and then they'll come up, and start shaking. The hook will be like either on top of the head, outside the mouth, almost intuitively, and that tells me that fish was following that bait and didn't quite trust their instincts. And the moment that they got fooled, they just got super pissed.
Yeah.
And that's their anger on display right there. And I think jerk baits do that to those fish more than anything else, right? Because a corky is like doop 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 doop, and it'll kill, and doop doop, and like it's almost like a glide bait, and it has that slow sink, but it gives them a moment of pause to like think about it, and maybe a more reactive strike. So really, a lot of the fish. That's why the corky thump is such an addictive thing, because those fish
Hmm.
that are eating those corkies, they're often not like ramming the bait to kill it. They're like looking to eat the bait. That's why
Yeah.
you feel the thump, is because the bait is in the mouth, right? It's in the mouth of the fish. That's why the taco is so crazy, because when that bait comes and it looks like a friggin' donut, you're like, that bait was balled up in that fish's mouth and it spit it out, and you're like, how did that even happen in less than a second? But I say all that to say is, when they're eating those corkies or soft ons or XLs, they're looking to eat.
Yeah.
Jerk baits, they're looking to eat, but they're more inquisitive than anything. And I think I've been able to fool more bigger fish that probably weren't intended to be caught or willing to be caught at that time. And that's where I feel like jerk baits for me have been a little bit more productive, because I
Yeah.
throw them because most people don't.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love jerk baits. It's something I've been trying to use more myself. So it's pretty cool to hear. Um,
Here's what I don't throw a lot of,
okay.
right? Because there's always a polar opposite to the other, right? I don't throw a lot of top waters.
Okay. That's that's interesting. I feel like that's probably a popular choice too.
Hookup ratio.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep,
Hmm.
for me. I've caught my biggest fish on the top waters right there. 11 pounder came on a she dog. But I don't, I throw them here and there more to see if there's fish in the area when I'm covering water. If I get a few
Okay. Yeah.
swipes, maybe catch a two or something, I will almost immediately change to a double D, a soft on XL, or something. If I have a layer of water between a bait and a fish, and it's not natural for a fish to eat something off the surface of the water, and
Hmm.
instead eat in the actual column where it's more visible to them and in their environment, I feel like there's a better hookup ratio with something more natural, as opposed to, again, drawing a strike in a more aggressive response to something. But that layer of buoyancy in that water, when they hit the bait, I've pulled hooks on more topwater fish than I've pulled hooks on anything else. And it's
Hmm.
for no other reason than I think that that fish just doesn't have a clear line of sight to just completely devour that thing. Tell me the
Yeah.
last time you've had a topwater bait where the bait is lodged in the throat of a trout. I can't. They're
Yeah.
almost like caught in the outside of the mouth, underneath the chin, something along those lines. Some those jerk baits, I mean, they'll T-bone those things where one hook is on this side and the other one's over there, and so they're looking at it, and
Yeah.
that's where I feel like the difference is. So for every yin, there's a yang, and that's my yang, man. I don't throw a lot of them, but I do use them, and I know what the tool is in that toolbox, and that's just to eliminate water and water, cover water, and see if there's fish present.
Yeah. Yeah, man. This is a ton of info that is just extremely useful on targeting these trout. Before we end it, though, I want to touch on one more thing. Releasing these big trophy trout.
Yeah.
Can you give us some pointers on techniques and methods to use for releasing these big fish?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, if you're wade fishing, if you don't have a boga grip, I highly advise you to buy one. It doesn't necessarily have to be a boga grip, but a boga grip like, where it basically has the springs, where I don't have mine in here, but where it basically releases, two pressure pointers, if you will, and then your ability to grab that. But also too, it has the ability, since it has a weight function in it, to spin. So if
Yeah.
you're going to get a fish and you actually then boga the lower jaw of the fish, and it does its kind of roll right when you actually put the boga grip in its mouth, I release the boga grip and I'll just grab my boga float and I'll let her do her thing. Mainly to not tear up the jawbone or break the jaw or anything like that, or pull it out of the water and the fish is struggling one way, you're trying to pull it up, and that's just a recipe for disaster in terms of the overall fish's health, in my opinion. So
Right.
once I get a good secure boga grip on her and she starts freaking out, I almost release it. I have a little leash that leads to it, and I'll just hold the float and let her do her thing. And just I try to keep her in the water because there's less resistance in terms of gravity and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So use a boga grip, one. And then also, too, if you're getting a weight and she starts to freak out, I'll quickly put her back in the water. I just try to keep that fish pretty much as chill as possible. Um, I'll do that, right? And then like for heavy hitters, I've been doing that. I have it tethered to my belt, and I'll just kind of keep the boga float tethered to my belt off of another stinky pants like tether.
Hmm.
And then I'll get my scale ready and everything else. And then I'll have, if it's me, I'll just get my phone out. I'm getting ready to record, and I'll finally go through my deal. But if you're not doing all that nonsense and you just want to get a good picture, just pick her up by the boga grip. I typically hold, one side of the boga grip. You can turn it around if you want to like tuck the boga grip behind your like palm and then like hold and support that fish. Um, Going back to Dr. Greg Stunn's, again, it's not going to kill the fish to hold it vertically, straight up and down for long periods of time. He hasn't shown any sort of mortality as a result of that. Obviously, if you do it for a long, long time, yeah, it could put a lot more strain on the fish. But typically, for a quick, visible picture of maybe getting a good, girth shot or something like that, that's not a bad thing. But I
Yeah.
say all that to say is just try to be quick, keeping her out of the water. I try to keep her as pretty chill as possible. Let her do her thing. If once I actually do put her on there, I will say this too: if you're not familiar, or you don't catch a lot of really, really, really big fish. Like I've caught 730s. That's not a lot, to be brutally honest, comparatively speaking to a lot of guys here in Texas. It's a lot for me because I feel like I've put in the effort, and those are my jams, right? But
Yeah.
I say all that to say, when I've caught those fish, I can say that 5 of them, I've actually brought them to shallower water. And here's
Okay.
why. One, I wanted to land the fish. I mean, that's a fish of a lifetime for me. That's what I go out there every time launching the boat to look for. And when I finally have her on the line, I want to give her the best chance, or I want to give myself the best chance to actually catch the fish.
Yeah.
So I feel like getting to shallower water is important for me. So if I'm near a shoreline, if I'm not near a shoreline, I'm just SOL, and I'll have to go ahead and try to boger, or if a buddy has a net or something like that, I'll try to do that. But more often than not, if I'm close to a shoreline, I will walk the fish all the way back to the shore, get her in like that shin deep water, and then kind of slide her to where she's almost on her side, to where she can't kind of like stay straight up, but she's on her side. So she loses a little bit of that leverage when she's trying to kick, right? And then now I get a little bit better opportunity to actually put my boga grip in her mouth. And then once I actually then secure that fish, then I'll let her chill out in that shallow water, and then I'll lead her back, just holding the boga grip with the fish still in the water, a little bit back to deeper water where she can right herself and then keep those gills flowing. Finally get a picture, this, that, and the other thing, and then
Yeah.
quickly out of the water, get a couple quick shots, put her back in the water, let her chill out for a second, and then I'll release the boga grip out of her mouth when I'm ready to release her. And what I'll do is I'll simply, and for those who are watching can kind of see my hands, but basically like not hold the tail, but like caress the tail. That sounds really gay. I'm sorry, but let's say like where I'm not like squeezing it, right? But I'm like, I have my hands around her to where she's not going to go anywhere unless she wants to. And
Yeah.
that's the key. So it's there. It's just caging her kind of, tail in that caudal area of her body. And then right when that fish kind of gets her senses and she starts to give that, kick, if you will, she's not going to get a lot of resistance from me. And then I just release my hands and off she goes. What I find with a lot of people and where they make a little bit of a mistake is they'll hold that tail and they'll try to like, swish the fish back and forth and this, that, and the other thing. I just
Hmm.
hold it right there and kind of let her get her senses, because when they're holding the tail and she wants to kick, now there's some resistance, right? She's put forth
Yeah.
some energy and she can't quite go, and then they release it. And by that point, she's already used some energy. And what you find is that fish will start to kind of almost slide belly up, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm holding them, she can kind of kick and she's not getting any resistance from me. So the energy she just exerted is getting back to where she needs to be, right? So a long way to say, try to keep the fish as chill as possible. Hard to do, especially when you get her close to landing. They go berserk. Just calm yourself. It is a big deal, but it's not a big deal. Put the boga on the fish. Take your time. You're going to be excited. The heart's racing, knees are shaking, hands are shaking. Like, I've been there. It still happens.
Yeah.
Mind's racing. Oh man, get a good picture. Like everything's going a mile a minute. But just take a deep breath, man. Step back. Make sure that fish is upright in the water. Her back's up there, and then when you go to release her, just pull that bow grip off. Don't swish her back and forth, but just hold her there. Just kind of let her get her senses, and then just kind of caress that tail. And when she's ready to go, she'll just kick off, man. So that's the best way to do it, in my opinion. Like fish grips and any sort of clamp style jaw gripper, if you will. I don't like those just because they are so rigid, but
Hmm.
it's better than nothing. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's some good info. I'm guilty myself of grabbing the fish by the tail and trying to help it swim and rush some fresh oxygen of the water through the
Yep.
gills. So,
Yep.
yeah, that's good info. Well, man, I know this episode's probably went a little longer than either one of us expected, but I really appreciate your time,
Of
man.
course, brother.
This has been
Buddy.
super informative. I'm going to go back and listen to this a few times and take notes.
No, man.
Um,
I hope people, came away, if for nothing else, man, maybe considering their own approach. And that's
yeah,
probably the best thing that you can do is, man, I am not speaking gospel, I will tell you, because so many more people do it so many different ways that all of us
right.
can't be wrong, right? So you got to find what works for you, apply to that. I'm just giving what works for me. That may or may not be applicable. And if it is, great. If it isn't, then that's okay. Trust your own instinct, trust your own intuition, and fish that. Because at the end of the day, what's between the ears and gives you confidence, that is the ultimate goal. Because again, once you catch one big giant trout, man, if you haven't done it before, it's the most exhilarating thing literally in the entire world for me and for many
Yeah.
anglers and probably those who are listening, because when it happens, you're like, this is incredible. And you cannot wait
Hmm.
to do it again. And before long, I mean, it's all you want to do. And
Yeah.
that's where I'm at in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, I'm going to go ahead and end the episode here. But like I said, I really appreciate your time, Chris.
You got it, Josh.
I look forward to having some conversations outside of this with you about some other details.
Sure, bud. Anytime.
Well, everybody, I appreciate y'all tuning in. I appreciate y'all listening. I hope y'all learned something. I know I've learned a lot. And like I said, I'm going to have to go back and listen again. But till the next episode, y'all take care and God bless.